Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. It's time now for the week that was. Let's take a look at the top stories that made headlines around the globe this week. And we're starting here in Nigeria, where President Bola Tinubu on Wednesday this week reaffirmed his order to withdraw police officers from persons categorized as very important persons and return them to core policing duties. I honestly believe in what I said, and I quote, "It should be effected. If you have any problem because of the nature of your assignment, contact the IGP and get my clearance," Tinubu said, apparently sounding fed up with the slow pace of compliance. He directed the Minister of Interior, Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, to liaise with the Inspector General of Police, Kaide Egbetukun, and the National Security and Civil Defense Corps to immediately replace withdrawn escorts so that they did not have people exposed. He also asked the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, and the Department of State Services to issue further guidance and ensure that the directive is effected. Well, President Bola Tinubu has, of course, emphasized that he does require that police escorts be removed from very important persons, VIPs, as they are known. Also this week, of course, Nigeria's Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka did call out the police escorts, or what he called the battalion surrounding the president's son. Of course, this morning or yesterday, I did see that we now have the absurdity of Nigerian police trying to catch other members of the Nigerian police force in front of estates such as Banana Island here in Ikoyi, in Lagos, or Dolphin Estate. You see police on guard to catch other police officers because a directive was given and police ignored that directive. And we're also seeing police officers now dressed in casual clothing, civilian clothing, trench coats, still carrying their long guns, still covering VIPs. We have high net worth individuals and very important persons now seen hiding behind their estate gates in their gilded cages, feeling kind of naked, afraid to come out during this festive Christmas season. Apart from the absurdity of what it seems in terms of the Nigerian police not being able to get itself in order, we also have to think about what this message that we have been sending to the Nigerian people for a very long time before this period, which is that some lives are more important than others. That police is no longer who should be ensured to ensure our safety, our internal safety in this country. Rather, we look to the military when someone is kidnapped, when the terrorist attacks, we look to the military because the police for a very long time have abdicated their core duties and serve as security personnel of the rich and famous, of the Instagram celebrities, of the children of the rich and famous, who you will see these. It's honestly, it's a uniquely Nigerian absurdity where you see a child going to the airport with 4 cars and men with long guns and automatic rifles, and then you tell us that okay, that is the child of a very important person, and we must ask ourselves: is that child life more valuable than the children in Yelwata? Is it more valuable than the children that were kidnapped in Niger State? Is it more valuable than the children who are still currently missing as Christmas time comes? Is it more valuable than the children in universities who are too afraid to go home, who have lost members of their family and may not even have people to go home to because of the insecurity that we're being faced with in different parts of this country, where we have for a very long time in Nigeria lied to ourselves that might is right, that wealth is what rules this country, and that rot, because when the Nobel laureate spoke, when Wole Soyinka spoke, I really appreciated it because I have seen what this convoys look like, but it goes beyond that. I've seen a university student president have his own convoy. I've seen special assistants to the president have their own convoy. People who are, for all intents and purposes, probably unemployable elsewhere. But they move around, and this is a perception of influence and power, is that you show might, you show power, you hire member of our police force. And another thing that is not being discussed here, which must be discussed, is that police welfare must be improved upon, because the police are also hiding and changing into civilian clothing because they know that regardless of what their core duties are, a lot of them live in places that are uninhabitable. A lot of them, their wages are so low they can barely take care of their families. And so when we're talking about the fact that police are now going against police order itself, we must also talk about the rot that we have allowed fester in our society.
Sadly, it's an absurdity, like you said, that has festered because the system allows it. and we do not have to put this to a vote before we can gauge the mood of the nation that practically everybody supports President Tinubu on this initiative. It is not the first time that you will hear things like this, but the difference is that in the past, it is the Inspector General of Police that will say, oh, we're withdrawing all police officers from VIP private engagement. But this time around, it is the president, the commander-in-chief of the nation, that is saying that, no, we cannot allow this nonsense, to continue. It's a shame, though, that few days after the president made that pronouncement, and the pronouncement of a president is a directive. It doesn't need any memo to back it up. It doesn't need anything. If you want it written, as you would prefer in civil service, you know what to do. But then to hear the spokesman of the Nigerian police to say that, oh, we're not clear about the directive because we have not received any formal, directive to that effect, that is strange. And I hope that it has been addressed, within the police command. But of course, this is not about the police, Nigerian police spokesperson. It's about the Inspector General of Police. What did we hear from him? He says, okay, I will carry out the order from the president. And one of the ways that I will ensure that we stick to that order is to form a task force that you refer to in front of Banana Island that I saw on my way to Ibadan. A few days ago, people stopping vehicles and checking if the gentleman sitting beside your driver is a policeman or not. That's a crying shame, because what it exposes is that the police does not have the wherewithal, the Nigerian police force does not seem to have the wherewithal to control its men. If there is an order to say that return to base, who is that police officer that will say, no, I will disobey the order of the IGP and invariably disobey the order of the Nigerian president? Then he does not deserve to continue to wear the uniform. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like you said, it's a uniquely, or shall we say peculiarly Nigerian absurdity,
Yes.
That you will, all manners and shades of celebrities, all manners and shades of anybody you can afford, the amount that you give a police officer. It's now even worse. And I saw it, with my very eyes yesterday. I've seen it before too, but I thought that maybe that was just a random thing. Officers of the Nigerian army guarding private parties.
Yes.
Guarding private parties. I mean, for how long are we going to continue with it's all about the VIPs? So for me, really, there's a challenge on the one hand for the new defense minister and, the service chief to say that you cannot allow, your men to continue to do that. Guarding private citizens, guarding private parties that are not leaders or service chiefs. But more importantly, will be to test the resolve of the IGP and, of course, Mr. President. I don't think the idea of task force makes sense, because you are now pitching officers against officers. Recall them. If they don't return, remove them.
And it's highlighting the indiscipline. It's highlighting the
So,
indiscipline.
if they can refuse, the Inspector General of Police, is it the person that they are guarding? If they disagree, and we have seen it before, that an officer would threaten to shoot the same person that is guarding. And how much are they being paid? So when you say that it's about the payment, I disagree. It is not an excuse. Yes, deal with the issues of appropriate payment, as we will say, decent living wage for police officers like every other person. But then it's not an excuse. Even if you pay them 500,000 and he knows that he will get extra 250,000 monthly from a Yahoo boy, for example, who is able to afford it. Or from somebody who ran an election and lost, and then he wants to be guarded, have a retinue, 4 or 5 people.
So he looks like he's bigger than his neighbor. But before we move on to the next story, I also think that it's very important that we highlight to the president that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Because when it looks as though there is special...
What's Gander here?
When it looks as though...
the president or the vice president?
Not the president or the vice president, but the children, the essays.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're referring to what Professor Wole Soyinka
Yes.
said, I will imagine that one of the greatest suggestions that the president will receive in all his first term as what Professor Wole Soyinka said, gave to him, with a bit of a joke, sarcasm, and everything. But the message is very clear.
And honestly, I wanted to put it...
And I do not think that Sheyi needs, that sort of retinue. If it's about saying that, hey, I am the first son or I'm the president's son, that's obvious already. Frankly speaking, you do not, and you are not in any clear danger. So reduce it drastically, you don't even need it. You will be protected in the manner that other children of commanders in chief
and world leaders are being protected.
World leaders, absolutely.
But I also wanted to put that in context of the pushback we're seeing from our lawmakers, as we saw, Senator Ndume stand up, we saw Senator Abdul Ningi, I believe, stand up. We've seen lawmakers also stand up in the House of Representatives because they're asking for some type of exception for themselves, because a lot of them are afraid to go back to their constituencies, and they are also witnessing these convoys, this police that we're seeing for the children of leaders or for the ministers in Abuja. They get to experience this first time, and so we're seeing kickback from different arms of government, and I think it's something the president has to be very careful about.
We will see such kickbacks, but then there shouldn't be exceptions. The president is clear about what you can do if you think that you're in some clear danger. For senators, for lawmakers, etc., write me for approval for exceptions, and they don't have to be police officers carrying guns. All right, Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tugar, on Thursday confirmed that the 11 Nigerian soldiers aboard the Air Force C-130 aircraft that made a forced landing in Burkina Faso remain in the custody of the Burkinabe authorities, despite earlier reports claiming they had been released. The development seems to have deepened confusion around the diplomatic standoff, with contradictory accounts emerging from both countries over the fate of the detained personnel. Minister Tugar made the clarification during a joint press conference with Benin Republic's Foreign Minister Olusegun Bakari at the ECOWAS Commission in Abuja. The minister said negotiations were ongoing with Burkina Faso's military ruler, Captain Ibrahim Traore, to secure the soldiers' release. The apparent lack of clarity has fueled speculation over the soldiers' true status, particularly amid rising tensions between Nigeria and the newly formed Confederation of Sahel States, a bloc comprising Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger Republic. Isn't it interesting that almost one whole week after that incident, now we are hearing clearly from the foreign minister, not on our own side, and not on a matter that concerns us directly, but because it's about Benin Republic. Now, almost sort of going against the information from the Nigerian army on day one of what happened, that, it wasn't a detention, it wasn't an arrest, it wasn't anything like that, that they sought the clearance of the Burkinabe authorities, and then they landed, and that our soldiers were being treated, with respect. That was what we got from the army headquarters. But then 6 days after, this is what we are hearing from Minister Tugar, the Foreign Affairs Minister. It is sad, you see, that we have to get to this point. When that thing happened and people thought that, are we sure? Can we trust the authorities? But let's give them the benefit of the doubt so that it doesn't look as if we're running down our country, particularly our gallant soldiers who might be on a legitimate, trip to Portugal, wherever they claim that they were going. But then let's be fair to them. Now we've been fair to them, but this is what we get from the Nigerian government, from the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. We do not know the state in which those 11 soldiers are now. We do not know the state in which our aircraft is, but then we do not even know how we are diplomatically engaging with the Burkinabe authorities. It is sad, and I hope that this sort of a thing will not continue. But then it's all about the sort of diplomacy that we are playing at this time. Are we being punished because of what Nigerian government did in Benin Republic, sending aircraft, bombing, a sovereign country, and then we'll turn around and say, don't let Trump come here. Don't let anybody tell us how to run our country because we are sovereign. Is something not quite right about the sort of international diplomacy that Nigeria is playing at this point in time? The question is up in the air.
Yes, well, I do think that the Nigerian-Benin situation is specifically very different from the Trump situation in that we were asked to help protect a democratically elected government there. And of course, we are signatories to ECOWAS Charter, and we help our neighbors. It's something that we're known for decades, rather. Nigeria is known for helping our neighbors, not only within the West African community, but also across sub-Saharan Africa. But going beyond there, you did a point, we raised a poignant point point there is that, are we being punished for what happened in Benin? Of course, we were asked to come into Benin, but beyond that, Nigeria, it seemed that was a win for Nigeria in certain ways in terms of trying to gain back some leverage in our West African neighborhood as an important ally to have. And it does seem that with some of our...
Are we clear about what we actually did in Benin? What precisely did we do? Did we start the coup, or the coup failed? You know, I mean, there are questions. That's not something I want to emphasize.
Those are questions.
It just pulls us, absolutely.
I mean, those are questions that, you know, always take time to tease out. However, we must see what the Burkina Faso army is doing here, because it is absolutely disrespectful, but it's also something to be very careful about. When Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali formed the alliance of Sahel states, and the first thing they started doing was unleashing tariffs on the other West African nations that were still in ECOWAS, is something that should have given us pause. When the president of Togo, Nasingbe, who has been there for over 2 decades, whose father has been, you know, a cumulative half a century, when he decided to start romancing the AES leaders, romancing the military juntas, is something that should have given us pause. When the Benin Republic officials come out and say that the leader of the coup plot has, you know, gone to Togo, gone to Lomé, I believe it was, they said, escaped to there. That is something that should have given us pause. What we are looking at now is multifaceted diplomatic situation going on across West Africa, with the alliance of Sahel states on one side and possibly along with Togo, and then you have Nigeria, Benin Republic, Ghana, and sometimes we do have closer relationship with our Anglophone neighbors, but we've always had close relationships with Benin, with Ghana, you know what I mean? And so when we're looking at the fact that 11 servicemen who are Nigerian servicemen are being held in Burkina Faso by military junta, it's not something we should take lightly. Because a lot of times when people discuss what the situation in Burkina Faso, people are try and tread very carefully around the question of Ibrahim Traore, but we do know his human rights record is not one that we can be proud of. We do know that Burkina Faso itself, he was in a military coup in 2022 that took over from a military coup that happened in 2022. They at least have, they have had coups in the 60s and 70s and in the 80s, in the 2010s, and not exactly a stable country, and they're not exactly a country that. All
right, Adesfa, you know what we do? Let's take
the next story because we're talking. Because I do think all these stories are connected.
Let's take it very quickly. All right, the Nigerian Senate this week granted express approval for President Bola Tinubu to deploy military troops to the Republic of Benin on what it calls a peace mission following the attempted coup in the neighboring West African country. Senate's approval follows a presidential request contained in a letter read at the plenary in line with constitutional provisions and ECOWAS security protocol. Our Rice correspondent, Omon Bazoaye, tells us more.
Military coups in Africa struck once again, and this time in Nigeria's tiny West African neighbor, Benin Republic. In the early hours of Sunday, several soldiers of the Benin Armed Forces, led by Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigri, took to streets shooting sporadically and eventually announcing the overthrow of Beninese President Patrice Talon on national television after an attack on Talon's residence in Cotonou. Within hours, the coup was quickly thwarted by loyalist forces with support from the Nigerian military, prompting an ECOWAS standby force to deploy even more security. In line with a request by the government of Benin and in exercise of its constitutional powers, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu writes to the Senate requesting approval to deploy military troops on peace mission to the neighboring country. Tinubu says his decision follows due consultation with the National Defense Council.
I seek further to consultation with the National Defense Council, the consent of the Senate for the deployment of Nigerian troops to the Republic of Benin.
President Tinubu also adds that the request is urgently required so as to immediately deploy Nigerian military personnel as requested by Benin's President Patrice Talon. As a major force in the ECOWAS sub-region, Tinubu notes that the situation in Nigeria's next-door neighbor requires swift external intervention in the spirit of mutual cooperation between both nations and in line with ECOWAS security protocols.
The government of the Republic of Benin is currently faced with an attempted unconstitutional seizure of power and disruption and the destabilization of democratic institutions.
The Nigerian Senate then swiftly committed the president's request to the Committee of the Whole and wasted no time in granting approval for military intervention in Benin, despite calls from Senator Siraki Dixon for a robust debate on the matter and the need for good governance by elected leaders across Africa.
I have thought that with the communication of Mr. President, which has been read this morning, that we will discuss the validity and the appropriateness and add value to it, because the whole essence is for that communication to be debated, for it to enjoy legitimacy.
Sorry, you are wrong. All the senators here that gave consent are aware of the content of that letter. They would not have given consent if they were not in agreement with the president's request.
Without the issue being debated, a voice note eventually led to a unanimous resolution being raised, even as senators took turns to commend President Bola Tinubu for his quick and decisive action to restore democracy in Benin Republic. Senate leader Opeyemi Bamidele clarifies the action of the president.
Today, what we have done was to respond in compliance with the provision of section 5 sub 5, because the president requested for our consent on what was done in Benin Republic.
The Senate subsequently resolved that a formal letter of approval be dispatched immediately to the president to sustain the military action in Benin Republic. Omo Bazwai, Arise News.
You know, this one, when I saw the officers of the Benin Republic who attempted to take over the coup, you know, my mind flashed back to what Professor Wole Soyinka said, that you don't need the Nigerian army to go and deal with this level of guys. You know, just send Sheyi's, you know, battalion, you know, to go and flush them out. You know, but that's on a lighter note. But of course, you know that the message was well passed. But of course, if anybody was looking for the reason why Nigeria had to go into Benin, you know, in terms of, you know, officialdom, this is the reason. Of course, there might be other arguments as to at what point did the note verbal, you know, come from Benin Republic, you know, at what point did the Senate grant the approval that was necessary to deploy Nigerian soldiers and Nigerian aircraft in another, you know, soil. But here is the explanation. I saw what the former Bayelsa State governor tried to raise, you know, by way of some corrections, but of course he was shall we say, was enlightened on why they had to proceed. But coming back to the issue very quickly that we were discussing all along, I think at the end of the day, what this points out is that Nigeria will have to be careful how it places politics, even though, yes, we're a regional behemoth of some sort. But then let's play the politics. You mentioned the fact that why is Togo romancing, you know, the guys from the Sahel Confederation, for example. Don't also forget that when John Mahama assumed office for his second term in January, Traore was there. Not only was he there, he was allowed to come in with a pistol. Is there a way that, even though, yes, these are guys in uniform, is there a way that other civilian presidents within the ECOWAS formation can seek to approach peace rather than just say, oh no, we're no longer dealing with you? Considering how we try to intervene with the Niger Republic and the coup, and then almost 2 years down the line, you know, this is where we are. So I'm saying that, well, I mean, ambassadors are coming in now and people will be posted out. Maybe we can do something a lot better. Maybe we can curate the sort of peace that we want in West Africa in a cleaner way, in a more respectful way than the way we seem to be handling the Benin Republic on the one hand, and the way that we are being treated, you know, in Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina Faso, by by the Burkinabe authorities.
And the Burkinabe junta, you're definitely right that we have to be very careful. And one thing that I have been thinking about is our recent closeness to France. It seemed it
seems to be at the heart of it, isn't it?
It does.
If you dig deep.
It does, because it did seem a bit of an absurdity at a time where France was losing influence in its Francophone West Africa, that we were hosted to grand receptions in France by Macron. And it also seemed that Nigeria does have to be very careful about untangling its interests, because remember, even when we were looking for ambassadors, the first three we picked were the US, UK, and France. France, very odd, not the UN permanent representative, but they have.
I didn't know when France became
a partner for Nigeria. But and another thing, because just this week they've announced that we will be sharing some of our tax information again with France. So it does seem that we must untangle our interests from that of France if we're going to be careful about how we want to wield our influence on this continent, particularly with countries that are ex-French colonies like Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. We must be very careful.
There are a few others that might not be as vehement as those three.
But they are still paying attention
Absolutely.
to it. And we because we talk about neocolonialism, we talk about how relations ebb and how they flow. But Nigeria has not known a master for a very long time. We should not buy problems we do not have.
At all. I love France. I adore Paris. I've lived there. But this...
You've lived there?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you've lived a great life. I want to live the life.
But this romance with France, let's be careful.
We must be very careful. But let's bring it back home to more local politics, as the governor of Osun State, Ademola Adeleke, this week announced his membership of the Accord Party just a few days after resigning from the People's Democratic Party. And in Rivers State, Governor Sim Fubara also defected to the All Progressives Congress, which controls power at the center, after many months of bickering and various other forms of internal party squabbles within the People's Democratic Party, the PDP. After announcing his defection to adoring supporters, Governor Fubara then launched into a specially composed song in praise of his newfound mentor and the president of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu.
If Fubara they tell you something, now this is the second answer. If you they support Tinubu, no follow corner. If they hear what they talk, we they support Tinubu, we know they follow corner. That is the second answer. I'm going to take that one.
Everybody sing now. Sing Fubara, tell me something. Sing Fubara, tell me something. If you support Tinubu, make you follow corner. Sing Fubara, tell me something.
Thank you.
We might laugh, we might dance, we might even mistakenly sing along, but what we do is we miss dignity.
No follow corner.
We miss.
No follow corner.
I miss dignity in politics. I miss dignity in politics. One thing that I will say before we get into the nitty-gritty of what this means, one thing I will say is that, because in the National Assembly, people were joking and they were like, we have our Accord Party members coming, and this was before the announcement. We have APP members coming, it seems, from Imo State before the announcement. And so it does seem that perhaps this fear of the one-party state, maybe we got ahead of ourselves, because even though the APC is still picking up members, just last week a member from Kebbi State was picked up. He left the PDP, decamped to the APC in the House of Representatives, was welcomed with a whole bunch of people from Kebbi State. I thought they would be busier than have the opportunity to come to Abuja, but what do we know? But now we have seen two governors decamp from the PDP. Adeleke in Osun State to the Accord Party, and of course Sim Fubara in Rivers State to the PDP. Now, Sim Fubara does not come as a surprise to anyone, particularly after the negotiations for the end of the state of emergency. There were already a lot of whispers there about what type of deal was made so that the end of the state of emergency that was declared by President Tinubu could favor him in some way, and he's asked for protection. For protection, of course, from the former governor of Rivers State and another person who's fond of song and dance, Minister Nyesom Wike. you know, we always talk about the fact that there's a lack of ideology when it comes to Nigerian political parties, the fact that governors or senators or members of the House of Representatives can change parties as they change shoes or ties in the morning, how they see these parties as vehicles to take them to their destination, as vehicles to get them to a point where they can acquire more power or maybe, you know, finish out their mandates. We also have to think about the integrity of our political system in this country. It does seem that we have made a mockery out of it, and that's why we are here listening to song and dance.
I mean, sadly so, you know, that's the sort of unfortunate politics that we play here. But, you know, it didn't start today. You know, there's even a kind of a deja vu, which we will discuss with our guest later, Dr. Chima Naji, about if we are running a dominant party structure or are we leading to a one-party state. But specifically on the two governors, for me, yes, I haven't cleared the issue that this is where our politics is headed, you know, unfortunately at this point. But then you also have to consider the fact that the governors are all about survival.
Yes.
And it's the most pragmatic thing to do for any governor today in PDP who is seeking re-election.
Yes.
Look at those who might still be saying, oh, PDP is the opposition. We're there, we'll play the game. They are not running for re-election. Seyi Makinde in Oyo State, the gentleman in Bauchi, you know, in Adamawa, they're not running for re-election. If you are going to run as a PDP...
Finitri should be running for re-election, no?
Finitri?
Yes.
Is he?
Should be.
Let's check that out.
Oh, yes.
But my point is that, and every PDP governor that will seek a re-election will come to that juncture where you have to be pragmatic and take a decision. If I run on the platform of PDP, am I sure that that election will stand?
Yeah.
That is the whole point of what is happening here. And for Adeleke, you saw that there was going to be a kind of alliance, you know, with the APC, met with the president here. A lot of people might even, you know, connect the episode with the First Lady, you know, a few days ago with the fact that ultimately he took a decision not to come to APC. It's about survival for him.
Yes.
And he has to go to another party. Where does he go? ADC? Is ADC a party in the you know, right sense of it at this point? Will ADC pay him in the Southwest? He took what he believes to be a pragmatic choice, and he has gone to, you know, Accord Party, where the Olubadan, you know, former governor of Oyo State, you know, used to be, you know, the big boy, you know, of the Accord Party. Let's see how that plays out. For Fubara, it's for survival.
Yeah.
But then all these songs and all these undertones of, you know, I'm the number one in APC and all that nonsense, he doesn't need it. Because this man has shown that he's not as brave as he tries to be. So let's see if APC will...
He's not as brave as he tries to.
As he pretends to be, you know, but let's see if APC will pay him. But of course, we knew that the assignment to... you know, to get PDP to where it is now, I don't want to say destroy it because I know that PDP won't die. It's just that this is not its time. You know, clinically, it has been disabled, and it's unlikely that it will be a factor whatsoever for the 2027 election. Sadly. But this is where
I mean, time will tell if we're going to see a master class of the destruction of a party or a master class of the destruction of a politician.
A thesis must be written
a politician
on that thing.
Because as you said, none of this is new.
No.
None of this is new.